What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. This is our weekly show where we review the Magic stories. And this week we are back with more of The Gathering Storm by Django Wexler, specifically this week, Chapter 7. This week, my quick review at the top. This was great. Really, really good. I would say better than some of the past few weeks, which have also been great. So, more so than other ones, I would recommend this one. If that is even something that's still relevant, because the other ones, like I said, have been good. This one's, I think, better than that. I really, really enjoyed this one. What about you?
I agree. I think this one was probably the best one so far.
It's very good. And it's weird to, like, break up. I mean, obviously, Wizards is doing it in the way that they've chosen to deliver it to us. It's not our choice to break it up this way, but this is how we're reviewing it because this is how it's being delivered week by week. And it is somewhat the length of what has been traditional weekly stories for Magic, so that's why we're breaking it up this way. But I feel like for regular novels, it's not usually appropriate to break it up chapter by chapter and be like, this is the best chapter so far. It's like, you know, it all comes together, right. But for these, it kind of works. And yeah, this is definitely one of the better ones in clearly our opinion.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So,
also, I just wanted to say that the reason why I am dressed like this is because we went to the racetrack.
Yeah, we filmed this a little bit earlier than our typical Wednesday the night before. We do have a racetrack near us. My company took us there for the day. It was very nice. And so we decided, I mean, and again, it was somewhat appropriate. We read an Orzhov, slightly Orzhov-based story, so it makes a bit of sense. So yeah, we went to the racetrack and we looked kind of nice. So
yeah,
let's wrap it. What story behind your hat at all? No? Yes?
I made it.
She's really talented. It's really nice. It's really, really cool. I don't know that you can tell from like a full distance or whatever, but yeah, Amy made it herself. She's super talented, so feel free to give her all the love in the comments down below for that. Yes, that being said, we are dressed in appropriate Orzhov fare, if you will, despite the colors, but still, yeah. So if you have an opportunity to go check out those stories, I highly recommend that you do. Find the links online somewhere. Just search The Gathering Storm by Django Wexler. You should be able to find links to get those stories. If not, maybe send out an ask on Reddit or something and somebody can forward you one of the emails. And in those emails are the links to the past stories as well. So you might be able to get those that way. So yeah, and then we will, because we want you to be able to read the actual text of the story because we're not trying to summarize it, we're just reviewing it. So we highly recommend that you read it beforehand, especially for a story that we thought was so good, we wouldn't want to ruin it for you. You should experience it for yourself. Right. Speaking of which, on to our full review itself. This one starts off pretty cool with, as we've talked about in the past, just a straight, like, this is how the last one ends, of them talking about storming Orzhova or infiltrating Orzhova and implementing their plan. And now it immediately starts with them infiltrating Orzhova. And so that makes perfect sense. It followed right along. There was really nobody else to go to, right? In past chapters, it would like end with Rahl and then go to Vraska, or end with Kaya and then go to Rahl or something like that. Yeah. But now they're all together because they're all working together on this. So there was really nobody to cut to, at least of the people that we've been following so far. And so it just cut to all of them just immediately after the planning and now going into this. So it was very good. And it starts off, again, some of these chapters towards the beginning of the story. And I'm assuming as this story advances for what is supposed to be a full novel, I'm assuming that as the story advances, there will be less descriptions given in terms of the setting where these things are located. Okay. Especially because, I mean, if you think about it, Orzhova is where they are. And sure, they're in the sewers underneath it to start, but it's still a place that we have had described to us previously. So you don't need as big of a description of what Orzhova is and what it means and who the Orzhov are and things like that. And they reference it, but they do it in a matter-of-fact manner of like, okay, you know, now we're on the main floor and the bankers are there and the supplicants are there and there's people begging for loans and forgiveness of debts and things like that.
Right.
And
I mean, I think they described it in a less blatant way. Instead of saying, this is what this looks like, they kind of said, okay, well, they almost like described it by saying how it was instead of what it was.
Okay.
Like they kind of formed conclusions based on how it looked. And that's what we were presented with instead of how it looked. Does that make sense?
Yeah, which is the appropriate way to do that, right? Because you've already described to us what it physically looks like and the like broad sweeping characteristics of what who the Orzhov are as a guild or as people within that guild. And so like you said, now it makes perfect sense for the next step of that to be, hey, guess what, right? Here's people acting day to day as Orzhov would act. And that made perfect sense to me. I liked that a lot. So there was that. And then the description we did get, though, the detail that we received in the beginning was of the zombies, which I wanted you to be able to talk about because I know you enjoyed it. Not that I didn't, but I know you enjoyed it greatly.
I mean, realistically speaking, it's just good writing. Like, I think that portion created a mood instead of just instead of just sort of stating what you're seeing, it put you there, you know? It created that world around you, so you could just be in it.
Yeah.
Instead of just being told what it would look like if you were there. It just dropped you right in.
Yeah, and I wrote down some of the individual things that I like that I was able to take away. The multicolored growths on it, along with the fungi, the growing new life, right, where it said that they were dead, but they were growing new life in the fungus. The scavengers eating them from the inside so that they rustled even when they were standing still.
I just loved the language. It was so good.
And then the limbs falling off with a wet pop. Like, come on, that's so good. So cool. So yeah, that was great. I really, really enjoyed that. We got a little bit of an interesting tidbit about Vraska, where we found, because this part was told from Vraska's perspective, and we got a little bit of insight into the fact that Vraska is not, as one of the few people in Ral's life, is not aware that he is a planeswalker.
Right.
Right? Is aware of what...
Regardless of the fact that she is.
Right. Well, I was going to say, she's clearly aware of what a planeswalker is, which is something that Ral is surprised about when so many people know what that is. But she doesn't know that he is. She knows... She's able to conclude that Kaya is, based on the fact that Kaya has no idea what the hell's going on Ravnica at all. But Ral's been around. So Ral knows these things, but Vraska is still purposefully suspicious of everyone. And she says she doesn't know about Ral or Hekara. Now, notably, Hekara we know is not, but Ral we know is, and Vraska does not know that. I presume once we get to War of the Spark, she will figure it out very quickly. Or maybe she finds out towards the latter end of this story. Who knows? We will obviously still be here reading them to find out, but it's interesting that that's something that's mentioned, that she doesn't know. She doesn't know if Ral's a planeswalker or not. But the reason that they bring it up is, again, a little seed dropped about something that kind of flows through the entirety of this story, and I feel like it was a little less impactful of a payoff at first, and then it kind of worked for me, but throughout this whole story, they keep giving you the thread of Ral has an escape plan, but nobody knows what it is, and Ral's not telling us what it is. What is it? How are they going to get out? They have to go up further for it to work. What could it possibly be? What is Ral's escape plan? And Vraska is saying, well, I'm a planeswalker. I always have technically an escape plan.
Right.
Right, where I can just planeswalk away. But she doesn't know who else among them has a similar escape plan that they could just planeswalk away. And if that were Ral's escape plan, he would be screwing over Hekara, clearly. And I think...
Which wouldn't be completely unusual.
And I think we can safely say that we know that Ral knows that Vraska is a planeswalker because Project Lightning Bug, Ral mentions one time to Jace that Project Lightning Bug was aware of the fact that Vraska planeswalked from Ravnica, but that they didn't know to where she planeswalked. Because I guess they weren't able to see through the Immortal Sun once she got to Ixalan.
Okay.
So that makes a bit of sense, but it shows that Ral knows that Vraska is, and Ral and Vraska both know that Kaya is. Vraska doesn't know that Ral is, and it's, I guess, unclear if Kaya is aware of any of them being walkers or not, at least from this. I may have forgotten at a time where Ral may have revealed that or something, but it's interesting to know that dichotomy and to know who of these walkers are aware of the other planeswalkers' existence.
Okay.
I think that's kind of interesting. Now, when we get to storming the castle, if you will, from the sewers.
Oh, yeah.
I wrote your name again for this. Do you want to talk about the fight scene with the spiders and the beetles and the zombies and the thralls?
He said that they were as big as a horse. I was just like, what? Why? Like, well, not necessary.
But we talked a few weeks ago, 2 or 3 or so, about the fact that the fight scene was it in the Orzhov temple again? I don't exactly recall, but it was a fight scene from a previous story.
Outside of it.
I don't exactly remember, but where there was like the traitor, but it was the guy who was being controlled by Bolus. It turns out, and Ral ends up killing that guy, and he's working with Vraska kind of for the first time. Those fight scenes in that story were okay. They were fine, they were easy enough to follow, but they didn't really have...
suspense?
Yeah, or like enough action, if that makes sense. It was something that we were saying, like, we felt like it fell a little bit flat, but at the same time was interesting and we were able to follow it, and so we couldn't fault it, right? It wasn't bad, but it just wasn't great. And you could chalk that up to saying, hey, you know what? Maybe Django Wexler, not really a guy who writes fight scenes very well.
Yeah.
That's just a thing, right? Authors can be that way.
He does write well.
Right. Well, and now looking at this story, we could say that would be inappropriate to say that he does not write fight scenes well, because in this story, the fight scenes were great.
Yeah.
Like, literally every one of them. Whether you're talking about Kaya working her way down the spiral staircase and coming across the giants or the ghosts or what have you, whether you're talking about the zombies fighting the thralls and what that looked like, the spiders fighting the giants and the trolls and stuff, Ral and Hekara and Vraska fighting any and all comers, like a lot of the Orzhov soldiers and things like that. It was all great. One of the quotes that you asked me to write down was in reference to the spider. The spider would bite something and it would melt into a pool of acid, which was awesome. But when the spider was defeated, it was defeated by things that were bearing it to the ground even as they burned and died.
Which is just like so good. Like the level of commitment there is just great.
It's awesome.
But also like that language is just so cool.
Yeah.
Like you really get that sense of suspense. You really get that sense of being immersed in this fight scene, because now all of a sudden these creatures are literally burning alive and they're still fighting until the moment they die. Yeah,
and killing their opponent that is burning them alive. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, which is so interesting, and it really it's suspenseful because these are all the fodder, if you will, that they brought with them. And Vraska even says at the beginning of the story, none of them are coming out of this. She knows that none of them are coming out of this, which is why she didn't bring Crawl and like living Golgari members. She brought the dead, because the dead is, in her mind, as a Golgari herself and as the queen of the Golgari, if you will, the dead are a renewable resource, because there are gonna be more dead bodies. And there are always going to be more dead bodies and more rot and more growth and whatever, especially because, you know, you talk about the fact that they're being eaten from the inside out or whatever by the scavengers. Mm-hmm. Like, those dead bodies are going to fall apart whether they go and trample the Orzhov or not.
Right.
So, to her, it doesn't matter as much. But
right. So, not only are they a renewable resource, but they are a resource.
Yeah.
I mean, because otherwise they would kind of go to waste.
Literally.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, it really is that opportunity to show that, like, Vraska really is getting into it as being the head of the Golgari Swarm.
Yeah.
And is using her resources intelligently.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we kind of already knew from Ixalan that she had the ability to be that good of a leader, to understand how to use her power and to use resources effectively. You know, there's a level of that you need to have to be a good leader, right? Mm-hmm. And so she was such a good leader on Ixalan that, you know, even though who she is leading now is so drastically different, you know, those skills still carry through.
Yeah, and she's also a good leader in the fact that she is also fighting alongside them. She's not, as we talked previously, she's not the leader who sits back and just orders them to go fight.
Right.
She comes with them. And she is the leader for a reason. She's the best of them, fighting-wise, of at least of the Golgari that we saw here, obviously, and that she and Ral, both separately in this story, kind of come to the realization and the conclusion that they are among equals, with Ral, Vraska, and Hakara at least, if not necessarily Kaya as well, just because they don't really see Kaya fight, you know, presently, like with them, whereas those three, Ral, Hakara, and Vraska were fighting.
She's an assassin of ghosts,
right?
So
right.
They can assume that, you know, she's a good fighter.
Well, not necessarily. Assassins don't necessarily have to fight. Vraska became a good fighter on Ixalan with her saber and everything, but otherwise she used to just use her gaze. She would just sneak up on people and, you know,
but
assassins.
That makes her a good fighter. I mean, that
kind of.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm talking more. I guess I'm thinking more of like hand-to-hand combat, right? Assassins aren't typically in hand-to-hand combat. They sneak around and kill from behind or whatever, like with, you know, poisons and things like that.
A killer's a killer's a killer, right? So an effective killer can be any number of things in order to make them an effective killer.
True.
But they're still an effective killer.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I just don't know that killing and fighting are necessarily the same things. Like, being able to defend yourself is an important part of fighting, and an assassin isn't necessarily known for their defensive capabilities. That's
but they don't have to be known for their defensive capabilities. They just, like, being able to be a good assassin gives them the abilities that they would need to effectively defend themselves as well.
Right. And in this scenario, though, it's less about assassination, at least for Vraska's team. Kaya's definitely doing that, right? She's infiltrating, she's sneaking around, she's assassinating. When she comes across the giants, she's not really assassinating. Now she's just fighting hand-to-hand.
Right.
But Vraska's team, there was no not that there was no assassinating going on, because what Hakara did to that archer was definitely an assassination. It was really, really awesome. But otherwise, I mean, it's just hand-to-hand combat, right? That you know, they're coming at you, and you're defending yourself, but also fighting up. Whatever. Let us know in the comments below how you feel about assassination versus fighting, and you know, do you think they're the same? Are they different?
Well, they're obviously different.
Yes, but yeah. So that the fight scenes in this story were A+, like above and beyond the previous ones. And if at any point in that prior episode we said that maybe Django Wexler is not good at writing fight scenes, I withdraw that immediately and apologize. It was that particular one was not as good, but these were phenomenal. Really, really well done. So I liked them a lot.
You liked some of the other fight scenes too.
I did. not as much as these.
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, you couldn't, before today, say across the board that you didn't like his fight scenes.
No, that's true. That's true. I think, again, it was just that one chapter of, like, there were a couple in that chapter that were just okay. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Then we move back to Kaya. They were jumping back and forth a lot, which I like that. I like when they do that if it's done appropriately, where it's like, it leaves you in suspense and wanting to read more. They did that very well, surprisingly, because not all of this was good, but they did that very well in the Dominaria stories towards the end. Like the 9th or 10th, or, no, there were 12, so maybe the 10th or 11th, where the Weatherlight crew were on the Weatherlight fighting Yargle, and Chandra and, I'm getting names mixed up in my head, I'm trying to get this right, Chandra and Gideon are fighting through the actual Cabal area itself and trying to get to Belzenlock, and it's jumping back and forth at just the right moment where you're like, oh my god, but they could die right there. And, like, obviously you're not like, oh my god, they could die, because you would know that in the cards at that point. But still, like, they're in a dangerous situation, and and it was at the right moments. And here, I think, in this story, it was not as urgent of a cliffhanger as it was in the Dominaria stories, but I think it was still appropriate in the spot where they stopped, where you're still like, oh man, I wish I wanted to know what happened next there. You know, I wanted to keep hearing what was going on with Veraska and Rawl and Hakara, but now we're jumping to Kaya. And, oh right, but I also wanted to know what was happening with Kaya, so that's great. Now we get to find out what's happening there. And then at the next moment where you're like, oh, I want to know what happens with Kaya here, now it jumps back to Rawl and Veraska and Hakara. So it did that very well, and I like, when that's done well, I enjoy that a lot. And I think they did that well here.
Yes.
Then we get to, I talked about, well, so now we're with Kaya again. When she is going through, she is coming across some traps and some guards, and the guards are coming up the stairs, so she hides in the wall. And then she comes out of the wall, and they said, like, she takes a big gasp of air, but then waits for them to get a little bit further up before she goes down again, so that they don't really hear her as well. Very nice. Very good use of, like, rogue-esque skills for people, I guess, in D&D terminology. Rogue-like skills of being stealthy and walking down, or assassin skills, I guess, really, right? And then she gets 2 traps. And she's like, oh, this door is warded, but I have to go through it, so I'll go through the wall.
Right.
And she goes through the wall, and then steps forward and then to the side, and she's like, ha!
Into a trap.
Yeah. But she's cocky about it first.
Right.
She's like, wow, these guys suck. You know, be less predictable. And then a saw almost cuts her in half.
Right. And then she's like, oh, never mind.
Yeah.
Sorry.
She's like, all right, I guess they weren't as predictable as I thought. Like, that's great.
Right.
That's really, really cool. And well written for Kaya as a character to be like, you know, in her own head during her assassinations and stuff, but like cocky as anything.
Right.
Just going through and being like, this is great, this is super easy, I'm going to kill these people.
You know what?
Like,
if you could do that, you probably would be pretty cocky.
Until you weren't.
Right. Until a saw was allowed you to have.
Yeah.
And then cut half your hair off.
I don't know about half. It was some hair.
It was some hair.
Right.
I mean, her hair's pretty big, so...
Yeah, so a little bit.
A little bit of hair.
Cut some curls off or something. But yeah, I thought that was great. Yeah. Again, for anybody that likes the concept of a rogue, like, that is very classic rogue stories or assassin-like stories where, like, you have to infiltrate an area and you got to get through and there are traps and what does that look like? And she steps on that. And it was funny because as I'm reading it, Amy is sitting there and I was like, yeah, she steps into the hallway and then steps on and then here's a click under her foot. And Amy just goes, uh-oh. Because you know, it's a pressure plate. She stepped on it. She's dumb. And not that she's dumb, but like, you know, she was cocky. She got in.
She made a dumb mistake because she was cocky.
Yeah. She was in her own head and not paying attention to what was going on around her. And she was just like, I'll be fine. And just click. Well, you're screwed now.
And she certainly was not fine later in that story there.
Well, right. She got hit pretty hard. So yeah, so that was Kaya. And then we cut back. as she walks into a duo of giants whom we've seen in the cards. They seem pretty big and intimidating. I'm pretty sure they're like 5/6s for 6 or something in Ravnica Allegiance. But
and cool.
Oh yeah, definitely cool. But yeah, so you see, excuse me, you see, you know, she steps out into that, and they kind of unfold themselves in front of her, and now she's about to have to fight them, which would be something that would be really cool to see. But they cut back to the other group. Yep. Because you do want to see it, so timing. Keep reading. Yeah, it's amazing. Absolutely fantastic. Very well done. And they cut back.
The readers interested.
Yeah. And they cut back to the other group where one of the cooler moments in this story is the description of one of the trolls, I guess, who is fighting through with Hekara and Ral and Vraska, and Ral hears this like grunt or whatever, and he looks back, and it's got an arrow in its shoulder. And the shoulder itself and the skin around it is turning black and like falling away. And naturally, what would happen when you get hit with an arrow in your shoulder, if it's not something that would kill you outright, but it's like affecting you that way, the first thing you would think of doing is being like, oh my god, and like try to pull it out, right? First of all, hey, just a first aid tip to all of you out there. I don't claim to be an expert, but this is something I know. If you get something inside of your body, don't take it out. Leave it there. Go to a hospital or a doctor. Just FYI, just tips with Joe. Don't pull them out. Bad idea. But the troll, being big and dumb, goes to grab at it. And as soon as he touches it, all of the skin on his hand falls off, and then the rest of his arm, and from that shoulder presumably going out as well, and the thing like squeaks and dies as it just falls into a pile of goop and a skeleton.
Yep.
That is awesome.
Right?
It's not great. And then Ral like yells out, and they all dodge out of the way, and Ral asks Hekara if she would be able to throw her razor blades at that archer, assassin, whatever you want to call it, that is down the hallway, that's kind of like peeking out from behind a corner, shooting an arrow, and then peeking back, you know, sliding back behind the corner to hide again. And so Ral asks Hekara to do that, and so Hekara is like, sure, makes 2 razors, leans out, the archer leans out, Hekara throws, the archer falls, and then Hekara looks down and sees that there's an arrow in her thigh. And Ral, appropriately, having learned from watching the troll, tells her not to touch it. Hekara seemed to have known as well and or got what Ral was trying to get across to her, and just took more razors, like, you know, materialized more razors, and just cut a hole, a fist-sized hole in her own thigh.
Which was just unnecessary.
It's
like,
awesome.
There's no way it needs to be that big.
I don't know. Again, the illusion or the comparison that I made was from zombie stories, I would say specifically The Walking Dead, but zombie stories where someone gets bitten, let's say on the hand or the arm, or in the case of the television series The Walking Dead, I guess spoilers for like season 3 or 4, now that they're on like 7 or 8, but I'll still give the spoiler warning. When one of the characters, you'll know who it is if you watch the show, gets bitten on like the Achilles tendon, right? And the zombie bites the Achilles off and he falls to the ground. And the first thing that they do, realizing what happened, is they go and they cut his leg off, like at the knee. And the reason they do that is because if the virus spreads up his body and into his entire body, he'll die. But if it's an area that they can do that they can sever, like a hand or an arm or something like that, or a foot, great. It's when someone gets bitten on like the neck, where you're like, well, they're dead. Yep. Right? There's
sucks to be them.
Can't sever that. So there goes that idea.
You can.
But that's why I think, like, you think it's unnecessary. I thought it made perfect sense, because I've seen things like that where
I think the point of it was just to make her seem that much more of like a butcherer, you know, even of herself.
And a crazy masochist?
Right.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, and especially because, like, she cuts it away and then, like kind of seems, or, like,
butcherer.
smiles.
Butcher.
Yeah, good point.
Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Good point. Yeah. But she, like, looks down at it and kind of smiles that it's there in the first place.
She, like, giggles.
And then when she cuts it out, she's bleeding a lot and just kind of very haphazardly is like, I'll be fine. Or I'll bleed out. I don't actually know which. And
then when Rawl comes over and cauterizes the wound with his electricity or whatever,
yep,
she's just like, yeah, boy.
She made a squeak that was halfway between anguish and delight.
All right.
That is badass. It's so cool.
She orgasmed as he like electrocuted her leg.
Look, whatever everybody's into, right. I am not here to judge. There are some people that are like that, and more power to you if that is you. It is surely not me. I do not enjoy pain. That is not my thing. Also, for those of you that get this reference, please insert the arrow to the knee joke here, because, you know, that's super relevant, you know, present joke of the fact that she took an arrow to the knee. And then they were going to, at the end of the story, or towards the end, they mentioned taking her to a healer. I don't know if they will necessarily give a full description of what it's like when she goes to that healer in, like, the, you know, latter chapters, or if they will just say, like, Hikaru's back and her leg is fine now. You know, right, and either way, I'm fine with it. Like, if they give a description of it and it's a good enough description, that'll be cool and I'll be interested in hearing that. But if they come back and they're like, she went to a healer, they healed her and she's fine.
The random healer found a hole in her mind and gave her memories back arbitrarily.
How dare you? Too soon. Yeah, no, I don't know that I would care either way. Like I said, if it's a cool enough description of the healing, then I'd love to hear about it. If not, and you just want to turn around and be like, she was healed, look, she's back, great. I'm not going to
be like...
I'm not going to be upset if, like, they turn around and they say, hey, Veraska was healed, she's back, and her leg is fine. I'm not going to be upset and be like, why didn't they tell us? Like, I'm sure they have more important things to talk about. Well, and then we get to the last part with Kaya. And Kaya gets into the room with the Ghost Council. And filled with gold and coins and silver, just piled up everywhere. And all these old, fat, you know, finely dressed ghosts just sitting there. And seemingly, with all of them except for Grandpa Karlov, paying her no mind at all.
Right.
They're just like...
counting their money.
Right. And it's like, why are you here? We didn't summon you. And she's like, no, you didn't. It's like, that's not why I'm here. And they're like, okay, well then go away. We don't want you here. And it's like, you don't get it. you have well, because
that's the point,
right? And they're so cocky because they've had all these traps in place. They have the guards, the giants.
Right. It's not even about being cocky. They were cocky originally. They're so far beyond the point of being cocky at this point.
Yeah.
That they're just oblivious to the fact that there could be anyone to show up there that isn't someone they summoned, right?
Yeah.
Just.
And I'm not going to pretend. I'm not going to pretend for even 1 second what this last portion of this story was all about.
Right.
There's no reason to.
We're not even going to say that it's not just blatantly politically charged.
Yeah, because there's no question. There's not a question in my mind. I'm also not going to pretend that Kaya is not a woman of color.
Right.
Going into a room full of old, fat, presumably illusion to be white ghosts. Right? You know, and all men, all male ghosts. And she is going to go and
just
kill them all.
Counting their money. And
yeah, for no reason at all.
Well,
because
we
it's
summon you, colored woman. You know,
well, exactly. Yeah. But that's the point, right? That's exactly what this last section was, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. None. I think that's so cool and an interesting thing that they decided to do.
And apropos.
Yes, but it was done so well, and again, it's not forced. Because if that were not what the Ghost Council was like, and you just turn them into that so that you can make a political statement, then it's a problem.
Right.
But that's what the Ghost Council has always been.
Yep.
Since Ravnica was first released however many years ago, years and years ago, like original Ravnica, Ravnica City of Guilds, when we were in like high school or something ridiculous. A long time ago, that is what the Ghost Council was like. They sat around at their big table and they were just old, dead, overweight male ghosts. It's what they've always been, and they just hoard wealth and debts over the lowly populace.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
And that was back then. And now, arguably...
Still like that.
Right, well, and that's the thing, right? You can say that people who weren't aware of it happening back then weren't paying attention, but it is very much in the forefront today, I feel like, right. In our current political climate.
Right.
But it was there, and I think it was done well. I think it was done smartly and respectfully. Intelligently, I guess, is a better word than smartly. Jesus.
You're such a smartly guy.
Not even a little bit, apparently. But yeah, it was done very intelligently and tongue-in-cheek, but also not. And the line that I wrote down for that section when Kaya walked in was, "Enough gold to build a kingdom, locked away in a vault for the pleasure of a bunch of old ghosts." Holy crap! That line is so blatantly charged and pointed at one very particular group of people. I enjoyed it, and I'm not going to say, you know, that I agree or disagree, but that idea or that ideology, the way that it was shown in the story, was done very well, I thought. And again, that has nothing to do with my own political beliefs one way or the other. It was just a very well done story, again, that is very apropos for our current political climate. I thought it was very well done. If you agree or disagree, we would still love to hear from you. We just ask that everybody keeps it respectful, that's all.
Right.
Just because, you know, that would be nice. It did, the deaths of the Ghost Council I thought were very cool. I thought it was done very well, where like, she walks up and they're all just sitting there doing their mundane tasks and, you know, counting their money, like Amy said, whether they're counting their money, counting their gold, but like counting and then recounting it for no reason at all. Just none at all. There was no reason for it. They're just sitting there doing nothing. And they don't even notice her because they don't care. They're just so self-absorbed, right, and absorbed in what they're doing that they just don't care.
They're absorbed in their greed, mainly, right? Yeah. They're counting money because they have money to count.
Yeah.
That's the only reason for it, right?
And
the only reason why they have that money is because they haven't been using it for what it should have been used for.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me. And then they don't even stop and like care at all until she kills the first two.
Right.
And then the other ones start looking scared. And then she kills another one, because then one who is so overweight and just unable to get away just starts kind of scrambling a little, and she kills him too. And then somebody else goes, "Wait, how much money do you want? We'll give you money."
Right.
And she kills them too. And then she finally gets up to Grandpa Karlov. Now, during this whole thing, we do hear about her kind of, "Oh, there's a pain in the back of my neck. Well, that giant hit me a lot harder than I thought," because that one giant, like, popped something in her chest, and she thought it was, like, broken ribs or popped out ribs or something. But now she feels something in the back of her head. We, having read the novel previously, know what that is. I'm sure that would have been a lot cooler of a reveal if we didn't know that already. Right. Because the cliffhanger at the end of this chapter is her kind of falling into unconsciousness as chains wrap around her soul.
Yeah, which is so cool. The language there, again, was just so incredible.
Really, really awesome.
Loved it, loved it,
really
loved
great.
It.
It's a damn shame that we don't get the proper reveal of that.
Right.
Because we just, they backhandedly mention it in the novel because you're supposed to have known it already from these. Mm-hmm. So that will not be as big of a reveal when it comes up, but it will be something I'm going to keep an eye out for, because this should have been a bigger cliffhanger than it was for what was happening to Kaya when she finally accomplished this task, especially because Grandpa Karlov says to her, "My granddaughter put you up to this, didn't she? She's not to be trusted, you know." And then her killing the Ghost Council knocks her into unconsciousness.
Right.
That would be such a better, bigger reveal if it wasn't for...
If it was an actual reveal.
Right. If it wasn't for the fact that we know what it is already. And I will say, we believe we know what it is.
Right.
Right? We know at least part of it. That may not be all of it, but I assume that it is based on what we know. It seems like a complete version of the story. If they swerve us further and give us something else on top of it that they didn't mention in the novel, that would be great. I would love that. I'm just not expecting it because I feel like we know it all already and that, you know, it makes sense. So, but regardless, I loved the last portion of this story for that reason. Like, it did such a good job of being a comparison to the present day political climate, at least here in the United States, but probably elsewhere as well. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very smart.
Yeah, I loved the end of this story too, but I also have to say that regardless of the fact that I feel like it was very sort of piecey, just a lot of separate sections put together, I really did actually like every single section.
Well, and again, the fight scenes were great.
Right.
Really, really, like some of the best so far from this novel.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for a while. I mean, because as we've said, these stories in general are some of the best stories we've had in a while, and so of course that that would follow. So, but yeah, any and all thoughts that you have on this story, on our review of this story, please leave it in the comments down below. That is what they're there for.
Right. We want to know what you guys think. We're not just doing this for, you know, the gigs. You know?
Yeah, we want to.
Gigs? Is that what?
Yeah, I mean.
Giggles.
Yeah. Yeah. But.
We're giggling because we cut a hole in our leg and somebody cauterized it with electricity.
No, thank you. No, thanks. I have enough leg problems currently. Again, we talked about that on Twitter. I'm not going to talk about that here.
Okay.
I injured myself. Yay. But yeah, so thank you all so very much talking to us about anything and everything. And like I said, especially keeping it respectful no matter what we're talking about, of course, but specifically because it's a big deal, and some of the things that we talked about are for some, heavier topics. For others, it's just like, this is what I think, and you know, people are allowed to think differently, but this is how I feel, and that's great. But if this is something that is more charged for you, you know, just be aware of that, and look at yourself first before we have this kind of deeper discussion. But either way,
I mean, we can have a deep discussion, that's fine.
Oh yeah, we want that.
But just don't be hateful.
No, not at all.
That's not
respect each other, right? We would love to be able to have respectful conversations with each and every one of you.
Right.
So, that being said, having those respectful discussions about either that one particular portion of the story and or every portion of this story would be a really good way for you to join us, as we just did, in showing off your...
#Vorthos Pride.
Very true, very true, very nice. And we're going to go change out of these clothes from the racetrack today.
I've got to unglue this thing from my head.
But we had a really good time, and again, we hope you all enjoyed this video. Thank you all so very, very much for watching it. From the Geek for All YouTube channel, I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.